Now that I think about it, ancient Rome was pretty cool. Just look at these population graphs. Can you see how many people they had in 100 BC? 400,000. And look at these maps. Can you see how much land they conquered and how big their city was? I have an idea. Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. Want to go to ancient Rome with me? Cool. Whoa, we're in Rome. And I have an even better idea. Let's go see Rome's famous buildings, their columns, their arches, and aqueducts. We have to go see aqueducts. Here we are in 70 AD, and behind me, you can see the Colosseum. And it might not look how you remember it, but 10 years later, that's the Colosseum. It is one of the most impressive and famous buildings in all of Rome. And around it, you can see statues of famous people like gods, rulers, athletes, etc. And it was also a perfect example of the 3 columns that the Romans stole from the Greeks. And so on the bottom we have the Doric columns, which were big and mostly used for support. They were very plain looking. And then in the middle we have the Ionic columns, which were a mix between decorative and supportive. And then on the top you have the Corinthian columns. They were very, very fancy, and they didn't quite offer as much support as the other columns would. The Colosseum also had some pretty cool arches. It had 240 arches, which is about 80 arches per floor. And speaking of arches, the Arch of Constantine was the biggest triumphal arch in Rome. A triumphal arch is basically an arch commemorating an event, like a battle. Wink, wink. It was built in 315 AD, right next to the Colosseum. Another famous arch is... Time travel is hard sometimes. Another famous arch is the Septimus Severus Arch. It was built in 203 CE. It was used to commemorate Septimus's winnings over the Parthians. And around it you can see sculptures of the gods he respected and images from his battle campaign in Parthia. Here we are in 125 AD, and this is the Pantheon. It is one of the most well-preserved buildings in all of ancient Rome. But this is actually the 3rd time it has been built. The first 2 times they were burnt down, in 80 CE and 110 CE. Based on its temple-like structure, we can assume that it might have been dedicated to the gods, or used by the Roman emperor to do speeches or make public appearances. Like the Colosseum, the Pantheon had columns. It had 3 rows of 8 Corinthian columns, and those are the really fancy ones. They were about 39 feet high, and the columns were white on the top and bottom and gray in the middle. The Pantheon also had columns inside, with arches bordering the alcoves. Another impressive Roman accomplishment was the aqueducts. The Romans took this from other cultures and made them truly efficient. These complex aqueduct systems span the whole city of Rome. It took about 500 years to build, from 312 BC to 226 AD. They were usually made out of holes, canals, and tunnels, but their stone archways and bridges is what actually gives us that recognizable shape. One of the most famous aqueducts was the Aqua Marcia. It was built in 140 BC and was the longest of the 11 aqueducts that supplied ancient Rome with water. It ran 91 kilometers long and had several arches spanning its structure. It was also the only aqueduct to be built by a praetor. I think that's enough ancient Rome for one day. What do you think? All right, let's go home. Time for the blooper reel. And it had about roughly 347,000 a million columns, arches. It ran 91 kilometers and had several arches spanning its sculpture. What? Spanning its what? It had several arches spanning its sculpture. I can't. Had several arches spanning its structure. It had several arches spanning its structure. They're all three. The Aqua Marcia is still alive and functioning today. It's still alive.